Hi, I'm Chef Jennifer Basil, and welcome to Season 2 of Getting Saucy TV. We're gonna focus on classic Italian-American dishes this season. So these are gonna be dishes that you're familiar with, dishes that we grew up with, nice comfort food, the stuff that we all love to eat and that we recognize when we go to Italian restaurants. So join me as we start our first episode this season, and we're gonna make our chicken parmigiana, and we're going to make some spaghetti and meatballs. Today we are going to make an Italian-American classic. We are starting with chicken parmesan, and I'm going to make a marinara sauce. Then we're going to get our chicken ready. We're gonna bread it, and we will bake that off with some mozzarella, and then we'll finish it off with a little bit of spaghetti with the marinara sauce on top of that. So let's get started. So the first thing that we want to get started before making our chicken parmesan is the marinara sauce. We're actually going to use this marinara in this recipe and our next recipe, the spaghetti and meatballs. So marinara is just a simple tomato sauce. We're going to start with some onion and garlic, and we want to make sure we get our pan hot. And I always do this before putting the oil in, because if you put the oil in and your phone rings or you get distracted, you could set the house on fire. So we don't want to do that. So we want to get the pan hot. We're going to put some olive oil in the bottom, just enough to coat the bottom. We don't want a greasy sauce, so probably about a tablespoon. And once that's going, I'm going to put my onions in first. I'm a scaredy cat. It's easy to burn garlic. We don't want that to get bitter. So we're going to put the onions in first and let that sweat a little bit. When we sweat onions, we mean make it translucent and soft. So we're not trying to caramelize, we're not trying to brown them. We just want to get them translucent and soft. We will put the garlic in next, and that onion just kind of protects that from getting overcooked. And while that's sweating, interesting fact, so most of the recipes that we're doing this season are Italian-American. It's what we in America know as Italian food. Most of this food you don't find in Italy, which I find fascinating. So how did they become Italian dishes in America? Well, back in the 1800s, we had a huge influx of Italian immigrants, and most of them were the poor people from Italy. And when they came to America, meat was very much plentiful, something they couldn't afford when they were in Italy. So they started combining their meat and their pasta dishes together. One, because pasta is served, a starch is usually served in America with our dishes. So that's where a lot of these recipes came from. It was kind of a new take on the way Italians ate there, mixing it what Americans ate here. All right, so those onions are getting translucent. And let's put our sauce in. So I'm using crushed tomatoes. You could certainly use whole peeled Italian tomato product and puree it. You could use stewed tomatoes if you want more of a chunkier sauce, but typically a marinara is just a very simple red sauce, just to add a little bit of flavor to your pasta dishes. So we've got the sauce in there. I'm going to add some parsley. I like a lot of parsley. And I'm going to add basil. And the reason we're starting with the sauce needs to simmer. Because we're using a canned tomato product, we want to make sure that we cook that tinniness out of the sauce. Now, in a lot of recipes, you're going to find, to kind of get rid of the bitterness and the acidity of the tomatoes, people tend to put sugar in their sauce. I don't like using added sugar. I try to avoid it as much as possible. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna add just maybe a teaspoon of vinegar. And of course, what kind of vinegar is Jennifer gonna use? Red wine, because we all know that wine's my favorite. So I'm not drinking the vinegar, although I do have my red wine ready to go. So we're just gonna put, like I said, just a little bit in. And you would not think that an acidic vinegar would get rid of a bitterness in a sauce, but it actually does. It actually works really well. So now that we've got this simmering, we're gonna let that go so it can kind of develop those flavors, and we're gonna cook our pasta and start our chicken. Okay, while our sauce is simmering, let's get our spaghetti cooked. We've got a boiling pot of water. It's important to make sure that your water is seasoned with salt. You want it salty like the sea, otherwise your pasta is gonna taste like just gummy flour. So once we've got that boiling, we're gonna throw in, I'm using a dried pasta product today. When you cook pasta, since this is not going like in another sauce, we're actually gonna cook it according to the package directions, probably about 7 to 8 minutes. And again, just make sure that your water is seasoned really well so it flavors your pasta. So we'll just put that in, let that go for about 7 to 8 minutes, and then we can start our chicken. We are moving on to our next component of our dish. We've got the marinara simmering, our pasta cooking. Now we need to get our chicken ready, and we're gonna do a light breading on this chicken. I've got my breading station set up. This is a standard breading station. I've got flour, which we do wanna season. It's important to season every layer. So when you go to a restaurant, you're like, why does this taste so good? It doesn't taste the way I make it at home, because we season every layer. So let's do some salt and pepper in the flour. We're gonna do a little salt and pepper in our panko, and I'm using panko because it'll give it just a little bit more crispiness, but you don't typically find Italian seasoned panko, right? Breadcrumbs you can find plain and you can find Italian seasoned. So we're gonna season it ourselves. I've got a little Italian blend of herbs here. I've got some basil, some oregano, some parsley, and some rosemary. So we'll get that mixed in so we have some seasoning in our panko. Just kind of mix that up. And y'all know me, I make a mess when I work with dry ingredients, so just typical Jennifer. All right, the next thing we wanna do is we wanna pound out our chicken. You want thin pieces. So I typically like to put some plastic wrap down. It just kind of keeps your cutting board clean, but for today, we're just gonna go to town on these babies. So we want to pound those out. You got any exes you're mad at? Because this is totally a great way to stress relief. And then we will start our breading. So the first thing we're gonna do, and I'm gonna use some tongs to do this, we're going to dip the chicken in the flour. Let's get the eggs mixed together. Dip it in the egg wash. And this is why I'm using tongs, because otherwise your fingers are gonna get all gloppy with flour and breading. Dip it in the flour and the egg. Let that kind of, the excess drip off. And then let's put that in the panko. Oh, look at the beautiful herbs on that. Isn't that gorgeous? And we'll set that over here on a clean tray. Do the same thing with the second one. Make sure it's well coated or else your breading won't stick. Get that in there. Okay, let's get this over to the stove and we're gonna pan sear it, get a nice golden crust on it. Okay, we wanna pan sear our chicken. We're gonna finish it off in the oven, but you know my thing is to always use cast iron. I feel like you get a better goldener crust on it when you use the cast iron. So same technique, we're gonna put a little bit of olive oil in the bottom. You could put a little bit of butter in there as well, so half oil and butter if you really want to kind of get a brown butter crust on this, but I don't want to use any butter flavor in this. I want the chicken to shine just kind of as it is. So let's make sure that's coated and hot. Get that oil spread evenly across the pan so your chicken doesn't stick. And the nice thing about cast iron too is it is kind of a non-stick. So if you get that good oil coated on the pan, that creates a barrier between the bottom of the pan and your food, and that's what makes it non-stick. We've got our pan hot. You can kind of see the smokiness, so this is gonna have a nice sizzle. I'm gonna turn it down just a little bit because we don't wanna burn the breadcrumbs. Our sauce is simmering, our pasta's cooking. Oh, hear that sizzle? And I just put olive oil in the bottom of the pan, enough to coat it. And I love the golden color you get from using a cast iron. Maybe it's just me in my mind, but I just think you get a better golden crust by using cast iron versus another pan. And you want a nice light golden crust. We're not actually trying to cook the chicken through because we're gonna finish it off in the oven. Peekaboo. So interesting. Chicken Parmesan, or chicken Parmesan, uses mozzarella. It doesn't use Parmesan. We're gonna garnish with some Parmesan, but it uses mozzarella, so why do we call it chicken Parmigiana or chicken Parmesan? We think that there's a similar dish with eggplant in Italy. They don't make this dish in Italy, but that one does use Parmesan. So we think that's where the name came from, even though we're using mozzarella. But it's debatable. Okay, that needs to go a little bit longer on the second side. All right, now that we've got a beautiful golden crust on our chicken, let's get it ready for the oven. This will just finish it off cooking, and these are thin slices, so it's only gonna take about 10 minutes to cook. We don't wanna overcook it and have tough chicken. So you're gonna take your chicken pieces, place them on a baking sheet. You are gonna take, let me turn that off. We're gonna take a little bit of our lovely marinara, a nice layer on the chicken. I like it saucy. I mean, this is getting saucy TV, right? So we'll do some sauce. And then I'm gonna cover it with mozzarella. That's a bigger, wider piece, so we'll put 2. And then this is gonna go in the oven, like I said, for about 7 to 10 minutes. And when it's done, our pasta's ready, and we'll be ready to plate and eat. All of our components are ready to plate our chicken parmesan. So let's make a beautiful plate, because you know how I like to make everything pretty. I'm going to start by taking a beautiful piece of chicken. Look at that melted mozzarella. I'm gonna use 2 tongs, because otherwise I'm probably, oh, look at that stretchy cheese. Oh my gosh, I just want to put that in my mouth. Okay, and I'm gonna put a little bit more sauce because I love everything saucy. A little bit more sauce. Oh, I don't know, let's make it pretty. Let's put a little chiffonade basil on it. You could put parsley on this if you like. I like to get that added basil. You can never have enough basil. We'll put a little basil leaf on there. And then I like to serve pasta on the side. You certainly could serve this underneath the chicken. But I like to do just a little presentation, and I'm not putting it in the sauce. Just a trick, if you are not taking your pasta directly out of the pasta water and you're not cooking it in the pan with sauce, you do want to make sure that you coat it with some kind of olive oil or butter so that it doesn't stick. There we go, get a nice little nest there. We'll put some sauce over it. I'm hungry, are you? Pretty presentation. So you've got chicken parmesan. Of course I have my red wine. Only a sip though, because we have to make another dish. And we're going to move on to our spaghetti and meatballs. For our second dish, we're going to make spaghetti and meatballs. And again, this dish was invented in America, not in Italy, and it was brought or developed by Italians who came over and immigrated to this country. So they make their meatballs quite large, actually. Once they got here, because we had meat in plentiful supply and because we had meat that was less expensive and Italians were making a better salary here in America, the meatballs went from bite size to bigger and bigger and bigger. So let's make some today. We're gonna make them kind of in between. You know, I like to have them bite size, but I think to stay with Italian American tradition, we're gonna make them a little bit larger. So the first thing we wanna do is get our meatball mixture together. I'm using sweet Italian sausage and some ground beef. So we wanna get that mixed together. And this is where your hands kind of get all sticky and messy. You could certainly put gloves on if you want to, but you don't have to. We're gonna add some breadcrumb. We are gonna add egg. Egg will help bind the meatballs so that they don't fall apart. We are going to add grated Parmesan. You could use grated, you could use shredded. And then I've got some Italian herb mix, some basil, and some parsley. and salt and pepper as well. So let's put a little bit of salt and some black pepper. We're gonna get this mixed up. We're gonna form those balls. And when you're making the balls, you wanna make sure that you create them all the same size. You could use a cookie scoop is an easy way to do that, just like you would if you were making cookies and keeping them all the same size, or cupcakes. But we wanna make sure that they're the same size so that they cook evenly when we do them in the oven. So there's debate on whether you brown these in a pan or brown them in the oven. Eventually though, you'll want to finish them in the sauce. So we're going to use the same marinara that we already made for the chicken parmesan, and our spaghetti's already cooked, so half this dish is already done. Now you'll notice this is kind of what I would say wet, so I'm going to add a little bit more breadcrumbs, not too much. We don't want it overly dry. You've got fat content from the ground beef, so that's going to add more moisture, but you want it dry enough so that it holds together and you don't have a soupy, gooey meatball. That looks right about the right consistency. Okay, let's get messy. So we're gonna make our meatballs. That's a good size one, don't you think? We're gonna put them on a baking sheet just for now, and then we'll take them over to the oven and stovetop, and we'll get them browned. Okay, so we've got our meatballs formed, they're seasoned well. Now, there is debate, I mentioned it earlier, that some people like to brown these in the pan and in the sauce. Some people like to do it in the oven. I like to do it in the oven, and I'll tell you why. When I put them in a pan and try to roll them, they no longer look like a ball. They get kind of like flat on one side and then flat on the next side and flat on the next side as I turn them to keep the whole thing browned. So I like to put these in the oven because they're gonna come out browned all the way around. And then we keep that great spherical shape. So these go in the oven about 475 to 500. We want to get a nice browning on them. We're not trying to cook them all the way through. Once they're browned, we're going to take our done meatballs, put them in the sauce, and we'll let that flavor kind of meld together with the sauce. Okay, I think our meatballs are finished. They should be nice and brown. Got some good color on that. Now we want to finish them in the sauce. So let's take them, put them in our pan. We're gonna take our marinara that we made for our other recipe. Get a good amount in there so that they can simmer. Now let's get those in that sauce. And we're gonna wanna let this cook probably for a good 15, 20 minutes. Two things are gonna happen. It's gonna finish cooking the meatball in the interior, but also the flavors from the meat are gonna flavor the sauce, so it'll all come together. And then we'll be ready to eat. Okay, we've got our meatballs done. They've been simmering in the sauce, so our sauce now has a beautiful meaty flavor to it. Spaghetti's done. We're gonna garnish it with some Parmesan. So I think today's forecast is cloudy with a chance of meatballs. What do you say? All right, let's get some pasta. And again, you can put this in the sauce if you want to. I think it's just pretty if you do it this way, because we're all gonna mix it up anyway. We're gonna have to cut those meatballs to get them in your mouth, unless you have a big mouth like me. So make a nice nest with your pasta. I am going to put a little bit of sauce on there first. It with meatballs. Oh my gosh, I'm hungry. Perfect. Let's put some Parmesan on this. Some fresh grated. And you know, since my last name's Basil, I love to put basil on my dishes, so we can just put a pretty garnish on there. That'd be a beautiful dinner plate for your guests. That's our spaghetti and meatballs. I really enjoyed sharing these recipes with you today. They're simple to make, and you can get those authentic Italian flavors at home. Dishes that you recognize at your restaurants. We made chicken parmesan and spaghetti and meatballs, and for those recipes and more, go to my website, jenniferbasil.com.